this video, I'm going to show you some simple tricks that you can use to make your Power BI buttons feel more responsive and pop out. We're going to go through some formatting tips, whether you're using different types of buttons like, let's say, page navigators, the normal buttons, or maybe even the slicers to be able to switch between different charts. All of that and more. So without further ado, let's get started. Hi, my name is Fernan and welcome to the Solutions Abroad YouTube channel, where we cover tips, tricks, and best practices when working with Power BI. I upload new videos every week, so make sure you hit that subscribe button and the bell icon to get notified when a new one is out. So buttons is one of those visuals that you must have used in the past to make some interactive element work within your page, maybe as a means to move between different pages, toggle between different bookmarks, or maybe even do some drilling. And in this video, we're going to look at how you can design or think about how you set up these buttons to make them feel more responsive. And for this video, I prepared a report which already has a few visuals in them. So this report is doing some analysis already on our fictional company Northwind datasets, but the analysis in these pages don't really make that much sense. I only created them purely to show you the buttons and how you tackle them in a context of an already built report and how it can work in terms of visual elements within the page. So this fictional report that we've created for the Northwind sales has obviously a few pages here. We have the home, sales summary, expenses. As I mentioned, they don't really make sense. It's just a means to change or look at different pages with different insights. If you go back to home here, we have a few buttons that you typically implement in this type of dashboard. So at the top here, you would have different buttons to navigate. It's called in-page navigation, which allows you to move in between the different pages within your report. We have some control buttons on the top right here, which allows you to go back to the previous page that you're at, maybe reset the filters that you've applied, or navigate to a help page to get some more information. On the bottom left here, we have the sales by category, and then we have a slicer visual here, which allows you to toggle this line chart to look at either total sales, which changes the axis here, so you can see total sales there, and then toggle which changes it to units sold, so the total number of units. And then finally, we have this sales by category here, which allows you to drill through. Currently, it's disabled. If you don't know how drill buttons work, there needs to be a slice in the data for it to toggle as enabled. So if we select, for example, beverages here, that enables this button to drill through. So if we click it, it will take us to a page which will have those filters already pre-applied for us. That's not too important. It's just for you to understand the different types of buttons that you can apply within your report pages. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through each of these different elements, and I'm going to go through to you how you can format and make them a little bit more responsive. So let's start with these navigation pages buttons here on the top. So as you can see, they're all individual buttons, which didn't really enable the action on all of them. But for example, sales summary, if you hit control click, it will just take you to the relevant page. So what we're going to do is, instead of having individual buttons here, I'm just going to delete all of these. And then we're going to insert a page navigator, which is a new feature that came out last year, which allows us to create a sort of dynamic page navigator without having to create those buttons individually, manually on all of your pages. So we're going to go to, I believe it's inserts, and under buttons, navigator, page navigator. So what it will do is it will create a group of buttons that you can use with all of the available pages that you have in your report. By default, it just shows us all of the different pages that we have enabled here. But as of last month, you're now able to kind of customize and change which pages you are showing in this options section here. So you have a bit more customization, ability to customize these buttons. So let's start by going through some visual elements that we want to change here. Now you can see it already has some interactivity already built in. Like for example, it highlights what the page you're currently in is at, as well as you hover over any of these buttons, it also highlights those with a gray background, which is pretty handy, but I think we could do a little bit more to make this look a little bit nicer. so that they look like they are part of the header itself. So we're gonna do fill. Here we are. Transparency to 0, that's fine. Put no borders, and then we will change the font color into white. Here we are. So you can see that now it looks a little bit nicer. But you can see that as we hover over these, they look like they haven't changed the color. They're still showing as gray. So we'll just change that. So let's go back to style. We'll go to on hover. So on hover, we want to change the fill to something a little bit darker. So I'm going to do that. More colors, and I'm just going to just make it a little bit darker. Here we go. And I also want to change how it reacts when it's pressed. So we'll just change it to the original color. So as you select it, you kind of have some inkling of that action. What I also like to do is, if you go back to on hover, I like making the font bold when those values are being hovered, so that we know, or it gives some inkling to the user that those buttons are interactive and they are responsive, giving it a bit more of a app-like feel. So like this, for example, it means that the navigator is not big enough, so it kind of compresses. We're going to look at how you can resolve that in a second. And then the last thing that I wanted to resolve is the selected states, which is here, because that fill is a bit too dark. So I want to use the other dark one that we've just used here. So you can see that now you signify which page you're at in this page navigator. And you can see that, yeah, it's a lot more responsive than before. And what's great about this is now that you've created it and you've customized it like this, you can simply hit copy and then go to your other pages and paste. And you don't really have to do anything else. So you'll see that it's already selected which page you're at. And by default, clicking into these will already navigate you to those pages. So pretty neat, right? So the next thing that the last thing that I want to touch on in the page navigator are the names of the pages themselves. So the names are fine, but what you can do, so I'm just gonna make them short, just because I think that fits a lot more better at the top there. And what you can add on your pages are emoticons or some icons to just give it a bit more more flair. I'm gonna double click here in the home, for example, and add a space in between, and then I'm gonna use Windows dots, which will bring up the emoji board here. So we'll just use some icons here. So let's say home here. And you'll see that as you make that change on the page itself, it will also change how it's being shown on the top on our page navigator, and it already inherits everything that we've applied to it, so which is great. So, and that's because it simply takes the state of the page that we rename it to, so automatically. So let's go to sales. I'm just gonna take some random emoji here. It's not too important. Right, so there we go. So now I've renamed all of those different pages with icons, and you'll see that that's also here now on our page navigator, and it's implemented automatically without us having to make those changes on every single page, which is great. The next thing that we're going to look at are these control buttons that we have on the right hand side. So the back, reset filters, and help. And, you know, these are pretty much just your normal buttons, but, you know, we can do and, you know, use some different options here to make these a little bit more responsive and a little bit neater with their design. So I'm going to delete all of them. We're going to insert a new button here. So let's pick out a few that we might want to use. So for example, let's use the left arrow here, which is a means for us to go back. Let's just change a few of its style options here. So let's say for the icon here, we can change the line color to make it white so that it's more visible on a darker background. Change the weights to smaller weights just so that we can play around a little bit with the hover effects. And I think that's a pretty good way to work with control buttons. Now, control buttons, I mean, and buttons in general, you should try to minimize, not minimize, but make sure that it's not taking up too much space on your page, so that you can use that real estate to kind of show more visuals and make use of that white space. So for the control buttons, it's a good recommendation to use icons for them. So now that we have this, let's start to change some of the styles based on its state. So we said we wanted to change the style on hover. So on hover, I wanted the weights to be bigger. So as I hover, you can see that it does, or it is a bit responsive to signify that it is a button that you can interact with. And for now, I mean, that's a pretty simple way to implement it. Let's not go too deep into the detail, but you can do things like changing the background color, as you saw on the page navigator. You can approach it the same way as well. So let's add those few other buttons that we wanted, that we had before. So I just copied the same button. And then what I'm doing is I'm just simply changing the icon to for it to do something else. So maybe we want to go back instead, and let's just change it here, back. So as you hover, you'll see that it's already inherited that that change that we've made on the icon on hover. And yeah, let's do one last thing and copy and paste this one, and let's add by default the icon we want, let's say information, and then on hover we also want information. So now you have these buttons reactive as you hover over them, similar to how we have it set up here in our page navigator. Next is the drill button here. So as you can see, it's disabled, and by default, it's disabled. It only enables when you make a selection on any of your visuals on your page, which allows you to then click and drill through to the specific page that we set it up to. So what I like doing in these buttons is to customize and change, let's say, the text of it when it's disabled, to signify that you need to do something for this button to be enabled. So what we can do is change the text on disabled, select to drill, and then by default, this is now when this button is enabled, we're going to name it click here to drill. So now, as you can see, it says select to drill here, but as we make a selection, it tells us and it allows us to go click here to drill, which is a pretty nice option to change this based on your button state. Let's add a few more options, customization options here. So I'm going to select a category here just so that I can see what the default state is. We're going to go to the button, and you might think that just because you have added a text here that you can't add an icon, but you can have both. So let's say we want to have a right arrow. Let's just adjust it to be on the right hand side, make it a little bit thinner, and the text, we'll align it to the left. Here we are. And then obviously what we want to do from here is maybe add on hover, just make the text a bit thicker, and the icon weight to be a bit thicker as well. So as you can see here, if we have no selection, it just goes back to that. And maybe I don't want, yeah, we'll just leave it like that. As you make a selection, it changes that button to like that, which is great. So the last thing that I want to look at is this slicer visual here, which allows us to switch between the different axes, total sales or units sold, which uses field parameters to switch the categories that is being measured in this line chart. So switching between total sales and units sold like this. Now, if you look at the format your visuals pane, under the visuals, you'll see that there's not a lot of options for you to kind of customize this. Like, for example, even changing the colors on those different states, you're kind of limited to them. So you kind of are not able to change those states by yourself, or at least not with the customization options available in the visuals pane. So what we're going to do is, instead of relying on this slicer, we're going to create our own buttons so that we can kind of customize the colors ourselves. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a button. I'm going to name this one total sales, wherever I can find it. By default, total sales, we'll say no borders. I'll make it a little bit smaller like this. So as you can see, just with this, we have infinitely more options, because you can kind of add things like change the fill color, like using our own shade of blue. Changing the text color, which you can do like this, or even changing the shape. So if we wanted, let's say, a pill, you can see that it's not very difficult to do or customize with just a single button like this. What I wanted to do now is then we'll add a few style changes here on hover. So we wanted to make it bold like this. So now that you have this button, we'll copy and paste it to create another one, which is the one that we'll use for units sold. So we're gonna change the style. By default, units sold. Yep. And then, now it's a bit hacky. What we're going to do is I'm gonna create a copy of those copies. Is basically the not selected states of the buttons that we want to show if one is selected and not the other. Does make sense, but let me just show you. So I'm gonna change the style of these. By default, I'll change the fill to let's say white, or something a little bit like perhaps like this. Yeah, we'll just leave it like that. So essentially what we want to do is, if total sales is selected, we want to show this one with this one. So if units sold is selected, we want to show these two, but if total sales is selected, we'll show these two. And currently this is the only way that I can think about and think of implementing this. So let me show you. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go to view, and we're gonna enable selections pane here. I'm just gonna rename this sales, total sales. So total sales, units sold. Units sold, total sales. I'm just renaming them into something that I can recognize later, so I can kind of understand how they should be grouped. So this is units sold in the units sold bookmark, and that's what we're going to utilize. And then we're going to use the slicer here, field parameter. So now that we have done that, we're gonna simply put these. Well, actually, no, let's just create the bookmarks for now. So what we want to do is change the states of these, whether they're hidden or not, based on certain selections. So let's say we want to show, so currently we have units sold selected. So we're gonna do is hide this and hide anything that is total sales. So we just have these two like this, and then we'll add a bookmark, and then we'll say units sold. And then what we want to do then is enable these two. and then disable these two. Select total sales from here, hide it, and then add that bookmark. So we'll say total sales here. So what will happen now is if we toggle in between these, so units sold and total sales, you will see that these buttons states also change, tells you what you have currently selected. So as I change that, so does the buttons. So the last thing obviously that you need to do from here is just make sure that those buttons are toggling those bookmarks. So for example, the total sales should be toggling the bookmark to show total sales. And then when we go to units sold, or total sales here, the units sold should be toggling the bookmark units sold. So you don't really need all of these anymore. We just go back to the report here, and you'll see that as I make a selection, control click, it makes those changes and goes back to those bookmarks. So pretty simple. And that's really it for this video. I hope you're now a little bit more familiar with how to create responsive buttons within your Power BI reports. Thanks for watching. As usual, give this video a like if you found it useful. Give it a dislike if you didn't, so to do better for next time. Ask your questions in the comment section box below so I can help you and you can help others. If you really like this video, we have a Patreon page where you can support the channel and get exclusive perks like early access, demo files, and credits at the end of these videos. Thanks again for watching and see you in the next one. Bye-bye.